Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Neutron Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing episode 3 of the Adventures of Jimmy Neutron, Brobot / The Big Pinch. And Brobot begins with Jimmy trying to just hang out with his friends. He's got a new, nuclear-powered pogo stick that he wants to show Carl, but Carl's too concerned watching something called the Llama Channel. It's basically a channel with shows all about llamas, with the one currently being on about good llamas going bad. But that doesn't, like I said, doesn't go well. And likewise, he then goes to Sheen to play some baseball, but Sheen's too engrossed in his video games to even give Jimmy the time of day. And what I love is that Jimmy apparently gets so desperate to hang out with people that he actually goes to Cindy's house before he can actually ask her anything. He just bolts because he realizes what is he thinking. But whatever. Anyway, Jimmy realizes that he's a little lonely. No one's around, and he kind of wants to hang out with people. However, inspiration hits him as he sees a couple kids playing who are brothers, older and younger. And as such, Jimmy sees their camaraderie and thinks, hey, maybe that's the solution. I just need a younger brother. As such, at dinner that night, he does propose to his parents that maybe they could get him a younger brother, and they just kind of tell them in their own parent way that that's really not in the cards at the moment, which I just love how awkward it is. I mean, what I love is that while they try and tell Jimmy that it's a complicated procedure, Jimmy's like, oh no, it begins with conception, 9 months gestation. I just love that. I love that. Point is, though, Jimmy's parents aren't going to give him a younger brother. As such, Jimmy decides, fuck it, if my parental units won't do it, then I'll do it myself. And as such, in his lab that night, he builds a brother, quite literally. It's a robot that's supposed to be his brother. He's called Brobot, and he makes him in homage to Frankenstein. But whatever. Point is, Brobot is made. And Brobot is basically programmed to be just the ideal little brother. He's supposed to be perfect at everything, practically indestructible, and is twice as energetic as any other little younger brother. And since he's supposed to be Jimmy's younger brother, he of course idolizes the ground Jimmy walks on, and just wants to spend all of his time playing with Jimmy and just having fun. As such, Jimmy does do the proposed activities he wanted to do with Carl and Sheen with Brobot, but he actually kind of excels at them. When he tries the nuclear-powered pogo stick, he launches so high he launches straight to the moon. No joke there. And then likewise, when they end up playing baseball, Brobot actually is actually better than Jimmy, which is more kind of Jimmy's fault because he programmed him to be perfect. As such, Jimmy's friends do end up showing up, and as a result, Jimmy and Brobot end up hanging out with Carl and Sheen, and Brobot continues upstaging Jimmy at pretty much everything, resulting in him receiving the majority of positive attention over Jimmy. And as such, Jimmy just decides that he's gonna leave because, well, obviously they're giving more attention to Brobot. And while Jimmy's friends do kind of go, no, it's okay, Jimmy. We like Brobot, but we like you too. It's obvious and all that. But likewise, when the prospect of Brobot potentially going with Jimmy comes up, they're like, oh no, Brobot, you can stay. It's like clear favoritism right there. Not helped by the fact that Cindy and Libby come up, and while they do start making fun of Brobot, he kind of puts the charm on for Cindy as he says she smells like apples, and Cindy thinks that he's adorable, and, well, Brobot does what any little brother would do, and and basically says that he thinks that Jimmy has a crush on Cindy, before going around saying, Jimmy's got a girlfriend, Jimmy's got a girlfriend. I love it. It's great. As such, Jimmy kind of just decides to just head home, with Brobot hanging out with the rest of the kids, but when he gets home, well, he sees that his parents have already cozied up to Brobot. Yeah, he introduced Brobot to his parents earlier in the episode, and they didn't really know how to take him in, but they did seem to react positively, and it's clear they've just pretty much just accepted that Brobot's part of the family, which I guess is believable. I mean, Jimmy built a robot dog. I guess they can get used to the fact that they now have a robot son, although that's one more mouth to feed, but whatever. They're just rolling with it, and as such, they just seem to be they just like Brobot. They treat him like one of their own. Like, even Judy ends up bringing Brobot some snacks alongside Hugh. Although Hugh kind of loses some points for me because as he's showing Brobot family albums, he forgets Jimmy's name. That's negligent. The point is, though, unfortunately, though, while Brobot is receiving all this positive attention, he still defers to Jimmy for everything. And unfortunately, he's starting to get a little annoying, as Jimmy doesn't get any time for himself. He tries taking a bath, Brobot's hanging out in the bathroom. Jimmy wants to get some sleep. Brobot literally just swatches Jimmy while he sleeps through the entire night so he can get up and start playing some more. And as such, Jimmy decides he kind of needs to get Brobot to Amscray. And so he tries at first to just put him on a bus and send him somewhere, but the only way he did that was by telling Brobot that it was a game called One Way, and while Brobot may have taken the bus, he wound up returning back to the Neutron home later. As such, Jimmy decides that he just wants to shut Brobot down, but he finds that he can't do it. As when he has Brobot prepped in his lab to do that, Brobot does get a little sentimental because Jimmy does tell him he's turning him off, but he's like, but why? I thought we were brothers. You don't do that, right? And this actually does get to Jimmy so much that when he opens up Brobot's case, he sheds a tear, and it does look like it fries Brobot for a second, only for him to be revived seconds later because, like I said, indestructible. As such, yeah, Jimmy can't get rid of Brobot that easily. He can't bring it in himself to dismantle him, but he also clearly doesn't want him around anymore. So, what's he gonna do? Well, he gives Brobot exactly what he needs. Parents, as he builds a mom-bot and a dad-bot to take care of Brobot, and Brobot is very thankful for them, and they just seem to get along well before Brobot and his new parents fly away. To where? The moon. Yeah, when going back to when Brobot got launched up there with the pogo stick, with the nuclear powered pogo stick, he started thinking the moon was really cool and he wanted to go there. So now he and his family are living on the moon, and so Jimmy's at least not happy that Brobot's happy, though Goddard did record the Jimmy's got a girlfriend thing that Brobot did, so he begins kind of poking fun of Jimmy with that. So there you go. But that was one segment. What about the big pinch? Well, in this case, what's going on is that Cindy is presenting some kind of history project on Marconi to her class in Retroville Elementary, and basically it's about how Marconi created the first radio in 1870. And as such, of course, Cindy is being proud about this, thinking that she's got this in the bag, only for Jimmy to do his Jimmy thing and correct her by stating that it wouldn't have made sense for Marconi to make a radio since Thomas Edison created electricity 12 years later. Ergo, what would the radio run on? Of course, Cindy tries brushing it off, saying that maybe they found some other way of making the radio work, and while Jimmy tries to present facts, Cindy does what all kids her age do, and basically just starts talking over Jimmy so he can't state his point, and tells him that if he really wants to prove it, then he needs to actually get, proof. As such, Jimmy goes to get proof, and I do mean he goes. He just walks out of the classroom during a school day. I guess when you're one of the top students, you get that privilege. Again, he did say Retroville, so maybe again, least they can do. I don't know. Point is, he ends up going back to his lab, and in his lab is a device that he thinks will be able to basically prove his point to Cindy. In this case, it's a phone booth that doubles as a time machine. And I'm gonna kind of pause the plot summary here to bring up something. While I am watching these episodes in the orders that they're placed on the DVDs, and Wikipedia does confirm that this is the proper order for these episodes, I don't think these episodes were aired in the right order, or at least released in the right order, because case in point, the time booth that we see in this episode, we don't actually see Jimmy invent it. It's just a thing that's in his lab. In fact, we see the episode where Jimmy invents it next week, and so it makes me believe that there are some episodes that were aired out of order, or at least released out of order. And to further confound this, later episodes in the same season do seem to be episodes that were made for season 2, just based on a few things that you see in those episodes. And yet for some reason they were released as part of season 1. It gives the impression that certain episodes were made for certain series, but they were made or aired out of order. So I'm not going to correct it because, like I said, Wikipedia does confirm that these are the correct episode, that this is the correct episode order. But it is noticeable when you watch them, as there are inconsistencies in continuity, with this being one of them. But whatever, that's a whole other thing. Back to the plot summary. Basically, Jimmy ends up bringing the time booth as he has it reach into 1899. And he pulls Thomas Edison right from the past to the present day. Of course, Edison's like, what's going on? Where the heck am I? Where's my tea? And of course, Jimmy tries to explain that he's in the present day, though Thomas Edison at first gets a little confuzzled when he sees that Jimmy's lab is lit up by a light bulb. And since, that's one of his inventions, he starts yelling at Jimmy for copyright infringement. Nice to know they kept Edison's charming personality intact. Regardless, though, Jimmy's plan is basically just to bring Edison to the school, show up Cindy, and then send him right back to his proper time. As such, he and Edison hop in his hover car, with Edison just kind of rolling with the fact that he's now jumped at least a century into the future. Go figure. And And as such, they go to the Retroville Elementary, and of course, Jimmy presents Edison to his class, and Edison does end up showing up Cindy because apparently the radio wasn't invented until 1893. So that was after Edison's discovery, and of course, Cindy is wrong. As such, Jimmy thinks that that's all well and good. Well, actually, no, not 1893. It wasn't invented until after electricity. But electricity. Point is, the radio wasn't invented when Cindy said it was. Actually, it was 1893 that he mentioned. Whatever. Point is that Jimmy's point is proven. So basically, he wants to hustle Edison away so he can send him right back in time to his proper time period. But Edison doesn't want to go, not because of any wonders of the future or anything. No, he ends up looking at Jimmy's teacher, Miss Fowl, and he just is immediately smitten with her as he starts putting the moves on her, and Miss Fowl actually reciprocates, and as a result, both of them start flirting with each other and decide to start dating, so to speak, as they end up leaving the school, and we later see them at the candy bar just sharing a milkshake. As such, Jimmy is getting increasingly worried that Edison is staying in the present, and while Jimmy's friends are kind of brushing it off, immediately we see the reason why Jimmy is afraid, because, well, everything that runs on electricity is starting to fade away, since, of course, Edison was kind of a forerunner for electricity, but now without him, apparently anything that electricity itself is just vanishing as the jukebox in the candy bar first stops playing music, and then just vanishes altogether. That is not how time travel should work, especially since Edison admitted that electricity came out much earlier in time. So, and Jimmy pulled him out of 1899. So I think that electricity would continue growing even without Edison there. So I'm gonna call bullshit on this episode. I'm gonna call bullshit. Even if Thomas Edison was taken out of the equation, the point of time he was taken out of said equation, I think would have resulted in an altered timeline, but not one where electricity just vanished altogether. But then again, Jimmy Neutron and time travel are a bit loose when it comes to their relation, so what can you do? Point is, Jimmy needs to send Edison back. But Edison doesn't want to go back, as he is having so much fun with Miss Fowl that he wants to just stay in the present, and while Jimmy tries to tell him that without him, the electricity itself is just going to fade away, Edison tells Jimmy live with it and just goes back to his day with Miss Fowl. Although this does lead to a little funny gag, as Carl and Sheen, clearly unconcerned with everything, end up going to Retroland and riding a new roller coaster called Bat Out of Heck. And of course, the roller coaster's all going nice until the electricity cuts out for there, and while Carl and Sheen are hanging upside down on a loop-de-loop, so they're just kind of stuck there for the rest of the episode. As such, Jimmy begins thinking of ways to try and break up Edison and Miss Fowl, and, well, he has one, as he ends up breaking up a walkie-talkie to basically mimic Edison's voice. He speaks in the walkie-talkie, and outside of a nearby speaker will come out whatever you said, but you'll sound like Edison. As such, Jimmy has Goddard eat the thing, and what he plans to do is that he wants to just embarrass Edison in front of Miss Fowl. While they're having a picnic, while Edison and Miss Fowl are having a picnic out in the park, Jimmy ends up hiding in a tree and sets up Goddard somewhere nearby, and he basically just begins insulting Miss Fowl through Goddard, and Miss Fowl ends up hearing all this and thinks that Edison is just insulting her, as Jimmy calls her armpits smelly. He calls her a man, called manly. He basically just keeps insulting her in every little way possible. While Edison keeps denying that he's saying any of this, well, Miss Fowl is not taking any of it and is ready to storm off and leave Edison hanging. However, Jimmy ends up getting discovered as a squirrel ends up seeing Jimmy and mistakes his head for a giant nut, so it attacks him. And as a result, Jimmy ends up falling out of the tree and drops the walkie-talkie, which Edison quickly discovers. As such, he ends up calling Jimmy out and tells him that he's not going anywhere, but Jimmy tells Edison that he needs to get him back to the past. And as such, while Miss Fowl is happy that Edison didn't insult her, she does tell Edison that he does need to go back, which Edison's confused by because they thought they were having a good time. Maybe they could get hitched or something. Miss Fowl basically just tells him that she's a free spirit, that she goes wherever the wind goes, and while she had a good time this day, she doesn't want to be tied down. She doesn't use those words, but point is, she doesn't want to get married. As such, Edison is understanding, and so with him and Miss Fowl basically amicably broken up, he does decide to listen to Jimmy as he does allow Jimmy to send him back to the past. So there you go. Everything seems to be sorted out, and no sooner, because once Edison's back in the past, electricity comes back to the ride in Retroland, and Carl and Sheen continue enjoying the ride, or at least Carl does. Sheen actually liked hanging upside down for, I'm guessing, hours on end. So what can you do? But anyway, yeah, that was Brobot / The Big Pinch. My thoughts on both episodes. Overall, I liked both. I actually liked both segments this time around. I actually liked both segments this time around. Brobot, I think, is another... Both of them are, in my opinion, good examples of silly but fun. As both of them, again, just kind of take the premises they go with and then just run with them and just kind of show the various antics and hijinks that come from both scenarios. In the case of Brobot, I think what makes that episode more fun is just sort of... It's just kind of seeing the misadventures with Jimmy and Brobot. Because what I love is that, honest to God, the whole conflict in the episode is just Jimmy's own fault. It's his own. It's kind of like, basically, he created Brobot to be basically his own little playmate / test subject. He even admitted that part of the reason he wanted a little brother was so that not only could he have someone to play with, but he could test the more dangerous experiments that he wouldn't dare test on Carl. That's kind of sick, but what can you do? But the thing is, Brobot is not doing anything wrong in the entire episode. He's doing exactly what Jimmy programmed him to be, a little brother. It's just that Jimmy is not used to having a younger brother. He's not used to this kid getting all this affection. He's not used to the little kid suddenly getting all the attention of all his friends. And the thing is, since Jimmy programmed Brobot to be just that good, of course he outshines Jimmy in all these things that Jimmy thought that he would teach him, like baseball or sports or what have you. So I kind of love that as Brobot continues upstaging Jimmy, Jimmy does start getting a little bit more annoyed with Brobot to the point where he does start feeling out of place. And again, I love this because, technically speaking, Brobot's not doing anything he isn't doing anything he wasn't programmed to do. He's just being a little brother. And none of these things are inherently bad, because sometimes that is what happens when you have a sibling. Sometimes one sibling receives more attention than another. And it's not because of pure malice, although in some cases parents really should not have more than one kid because some kids are clearly favorites, but that's a whole other discussion that has nothing to do with this episode. In the case of this episode, Brobot is just being a little brother. Jimmy's parents are taking to him because, well, he's supposed to be a new child in the house, and he's not being a bad kid. He's being very friendly. And what I love is that while Brobot does continue taking all the attention away from Jimmy, he doesn't hate Jimmy. He's not trying to upstage Jimmy. He's, again, doing exactly what he's supposed to, which is just be a little brother. It's just that Jimmy is not used to all this, and when he created Brobot, he just expected him to be like a subservient little buddy, one who's supposed to marvel at everything Jimmy does and then basically just be a lesser him. But in this case, Brobot wound up exceeding those expectations a little too well. As Brobot was best at a lot of things, he outshined Jimmy in too many areas, and when Jimmy found that he now had to share the spotlight with Brobot when it came to his parents, he started getting annoyed because he's used to being an only child. And then likewise, going back to Brobot wanting to still be in a friendly brotherly relationship with Jimmy, it makes sense why Jimmy would start getting annoyed, because again, he's used to doing things on his own, and now suddenly enter a little brother who just wants to spend all his time playing with his cool big brother, and Jimmy's like, I'm doing stuff right now, can you leave me alone? And I like that. I love the conflict, and I love that ultimately the conflict is just that Jimmy was not fully expecting the ramifications of having a little brother in the house. So I like seeing that play out. I admit, though, I think the finale may be a little dumb in my opinion. I understand that maybe of course Brobot had to be taken out of the equation because status quo is God and all that. But basically, it is kind of a little annoying that Jimmy's solution was just to literally get rid of Brobot, even though he designed this thing. Honestly, it kind of would have been nice if maybe Brobot was worked around. If Jimmy did learn to deal with Brobot, or maybe we saw how Brobot was truly an asset to Jimmy. But again, I understand why they wouldn't do that, because this is 3 episodes into the series, and they're not just going to introduce a brand new character just like that. So they're not going to have it be like, oh, Jimmy's got a robot, a younger brother right now, even though he already has a robot dog. So it does kind of make sense that they would kind of basically have to write out Brobot like they did. But honestly, I do think it's still a nice little compromise between them. As Jimmy couldn't deal with everything, and so basically he decided, well, then I'll just make him a new family so he can fuck off somewhere else. It's a little annoying. It's a little dumb in my opinion, but honestly, that's a nitpick at best, possibly. Because, like I said, status quo is God. They couldn't just keep this character around. They had to find a way to get rid of him without outright killing him because, well, because Brobot's not an actively malicious character. Yeah, he can be a little annoying, but no more annoying than any other little kid. And quite frankly, he's very amicable, very likable. And what makes me still like him is the fact that while he did end up hogging the spotlight from Jimmy a bit, he was never outright malicious to Jimmy. He loved Jimmy like any little brother would love his big brother. So honestly, I liked that. I thought it was nice. So, yeah, when it came down to it, I do think Brobot is still a lot of fun. I like Brobot as a character. I love the antics. I love the conflict with Jimmy and Brobot. And while I do find the ending to be... while I am a little mixed on the ending, so to speak, at the very least, I do like that it was... I do kind of like how things did still work out for Brobot while Jimmy still kind of got what he wanted. I don't know. I don't know. Again, ending's a little weird, but it's, again, just a lot of fun. I love that. I love that. And as for the big pinch, this one, again, is a lot more fun. And again, something I appreciate, I like that they still wrote Thomas Edison to be kind of a dick. Because, yeah, if you brush up on Thomas Edison as a person, he was not a nice guy. Like, at all. A lot of the patents for a lot of his inventions were stolen, or were basically just the work of people who worked for him that he took the credit for. And so likewise, I love that when he's brought into the present day, he is very much just interested in his own self-interest. He doesn't give a shit if him being taken out of the time will result in anything that runs on electricity just vanishing from existence, which is not how time travel should work. But again, we'll just ignore that for the sake of the plot for now. And I like that basically that even when told about the ramifications about these things, he's just like, oh, tough titties. I'm with this hot girl now, so I'm just going to keep doing this stuff. And likewise, again, I love that when Jimmy actually shows that he's smarter than Edison, Edison shuts him up. Like, he rides around on Jimmy's hovercraft and he wants to know how it works. And of course, Jimmy gets into the complicated techno-babble into how he made the hovercraft, and Edison's like, okay, you can stop talking. It's not that big a deal. But then likewise, at the end of the episode, as Jimmy's bringing Edison back to his lab, Edison asks about how the walkie-talkie was built, and Jimmy once again gets into techno-babble, and he just once more repeats, okay, I get it, it's not that big a deal. I like that. I love that. Again, one of the first things he did when being brought into the then present day was see the light bulb and just yell at Jimmy for copyright infringement, because that's what Edison would do. And again, I just love that throughout this entire thing, the only way that Jimmy could get Edison to possibly go back to his proper time would be to try and break up him and Mrs. Fowl, because he did not give a shit if his absence from his proper time would screw up history. He was like, I'm here now, I'm happy, fuck all y'all. I think it would still be a little bit of a future shock, because even if he got used to the present day enough that he was willing to just tolerate all of our modern eccentricities, this guy's been dead for a century. It's going to be hard to have a social security number like that, my guy. But that's just neither here nor there. It's a kid's cartoon. I'm not going to deal with all those nice, nasty, real-world facts. Like what? Although I will nitpick enough that I will still point out that his absence from the timeline should not affect modern electricity, but it's a whole other thing altogether. It's just time travel paradox bullshit. Doesn't make sense. It's just a very general item. Doesn't make sense in my it just does not make sense. Again, he was pulled out of time after he introduced electricity, but what do I care? It wasn't 1890 he wasn't pulled from, it was 1899. So again, very much after he made electricity, so what can you do? But anyway, my point still stands. I do kind of like that I like the asshole implications there, and likewise, I do love the conflict with trying to get him back to the past, because again, he's just being intentionally difficult. He falls in love with Miss Fowl, which I called her Mrs. Fowl earlier, but it's Miss Fowl because she's not married, and I love seeing them get together. I love just how kind of charming. I love how charming he is, how much of an affable douche he's written, because that's just nice to see. I love that Jimmy starts getting worried and he again just goes tough titties. And likewise, seeing Jimmy's attempts to try and get him back to the past is actually pretty nice. Although I still question how Jimmy was just able to walk out of school to go get Edison. Again, least they could do, saved the town from aliens, but still, I think he does see enough real world logic is applied that I don't think he can just walk out of school, because if I could do that, I would have done that at that age. But my point still stands. The episode itself, just a lot of fun. Just fun seeing Thomas Edison being a dick. It's fun seeing the antics. The stuff with seeing Carl and Sheen hanging upside down on the ride is funny. I love what happened. I love what happened when Jimmy tried tricking Miss Fowl into hating Edison with him using the voice modulator. Overall, just fun. It's just a fun episode. Both these episodes are just a fun time. Just a fun time overall. So there you go. That's really all I can say. So. Anyway, yeah, hope you enjoyed the video. Thank you for watching. As always, I'm Samuel Johnson, and I hope to see you next week. Take care.